This is Keys to the Shop, episode 243, an encore episode of the Sleepwalking Barista. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me again. And if this is your first time listening to Keys to the Shop, welcome, and I really appreciate you taking time to explore Keys to the Shop podcast. Going now for almost 4 years, and we've been having a good time learning about the coffee shop and all of its intricacies and mechanisms that make it work. It's just a crazy, wonderful world, and I've really enjoyed producing this show. I'm glad that you're here to enjoy it with us. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to Keys to the Shop. Just hit the button, said subscribe, and you'll be updated with new episodes when they come out. And also, if you love this show, if you love Keys to the Shop and it's really helped you in your business, would you leave us a 5-star review over on iTunes? Trying to get the numbers up there, get the visibility of the show out there. I'm trying to get up to like 200, I think, by the end of the year. That's a really ambitious goal, but we're at 124 right now, so we need 76 more people to just get a 5-star review or a rating, really quick to do, and that would be awesome if you would do that. Now, I want to let you know also, Keys to the Shop offers consultation for you in your business. So if you're opening a coffee shop or you already have a coffee shop, but you want to improve your operations, you're scaling and you need better systems, or you just want to talk through some issues that you might be having with your business and you need some coaching over the phone, there's a lot of different options, both in person and remote. And I would encourage you to reach out. Just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. You can set up a phone call to see how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you in your operation. I'm all about helping people thrive in their careers and in their coffee businesses, and I would love to do the same for you. So again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Now, Prima Coffee supplies specialty coffee equipment, restaurant equipment like under-counter refrigeration. So if you have the need for brewers, espresso machines, and also restaurant equipment, Prima Coffee has a wonderful selection that they've curated from all over the world to fit with your needs. And one of the things that makes them one of the best is the fact that they work with you to help you select the right equipment for your situation, which is one of the biggest decisions that you can make in business. It's such a huge cost, and you want to know that you're getting the right thing. And that's the kind of peace of mind that you can get with working with Prima Coffee. Now, they're not just into equipping you with equipment, they're also into equipping you with knowledge. So when you click on the Learn tab over at prima-coffee.com, you're going to see a ton of resources created in video and article form that go over everything from grinding to brewing, latte art, machine maintenance, comparing grinders and hand grinders. It's really a robust resource, and they do it because they want to see you be successful in specialty coffee. So if you're in the market for commercial equipment for your cafe, then I would highly encourage you to work with Prima Coffee. Visit them over at prima-coffee.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by the amazing Pacific Barista series. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that have taken the world by storm. It is the choice of the world's best baristas, and the world's best baristas have actually weighed in on the production of these products. That's why they perform so well on the bar. Pacific puts a lot of energy into creating a product that works for the barista and with a lot of feedback from baristas. And so when you get the almond, soy, coconut, rice, oat, or hemp, you know that that product is going to take the heat from steaming. It's going to give you a texture that's perfect for latte art, and the balance of the beverage is going to be focused on the coffee. The Barista series is amazing. Pacific is an awesome company, always supporting the specialty coffee industry and barista culture. So if you want to give your customers the best plant-based options, then I would highly encourage you to go to their website, pacificfoodservice.com, to learn more. Get it in your shop, test it out for yourself, let your baristas try it. If you want the best plant-based beverages for your customers, then you want the Pacific Barista series. Okay, everyone. Well, I'm glad you joined me today. I'm really excited about re-airing this episode called The Sleepwalking Barista. It was episode 56, and now this is episode 243. So we've had a few episodes in between there. And I know it can be hard to comb through the catalog of Keys to the Shop and get all of the content, but this message in the Sleepwalking Barista, I think, is really critical, and not just for the barista, it's also for owners. because the message in this episode is all about going through the motions and not really taking control, not really taking opportunities as they come up, or being curious and taking advantage of circumstances, etc. It's all about, again, sleepwalking, But if you as an owner apply these same things, we go over 7 ways that we sabotage our coffee careers. This is the same kind of 7 ways that we can sabotage our own businesses. So this is not just for baristas, it's also for owners. And especially now, in the midst of COVID-19, as we're doing so much soul searching and trying to take advantage of opportunities that are around us, this message is more important than ever. And I think you should really listen to this deeply and consider how it applies to your circumstance right now, and whether or not some of these things are true in the way that you approach either your work as a barista, if you're a barista listening to this, or your work as an owner or a manager, or whoever you are. You'll note too that it'll be easy to think deeply about these things, because back then I think I talked really slow, and maybe I drink more coffee these days, but I know that's not true. But I just sound different, I think. But still, it's a great episode, and I'm excited to reshare this with you as an encore episode, and I hope you get a lot out of it. So here we go, encore episode of the Sleepwalking Barista. Okay, so the Sleepwalking Barista, that is me. That has been all of us at one time or another. We have gone through the motions, we've just done the work, gone home, and we didn't know anything about what we were tired, But somebody asks you, what did you do today? You really can't tell them what you did. It's kind of like when you're tired and you drive home and you can't remember actually driving. It's really scary. But oftentimes, it's like that with our careers too. It's not just a one day in our career. We could look back on an entire year's worth of work and wonder, why did I do all of that stuff? I can't even remember some of the reasons why I put myself in those situations. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And this is not going to be an exhaustive exploration necessarily, but really what kicked all of this off for me and really made me want to record something on this was reading a tweet by Cole McBride, who is an amazing barista and competitor, champion barista. If you don't follow Cole McBride on Twitter, you can follow him at Cole, C-O-L-E, Coffee, Cole Coffee. But anyhow, a tweet that Cole put out at the end of October said this: "Doing each and every task as a barista with intention and awareness will lift you to new heights." And I just thought that's such a simple comment, but it is one of those things that you'd be surprised. It doesn't happen very often in a barista's day-to-day work. And it's not something that you hear as an admonition to people. Managers aren't really holding baristas accountable for doing their tasks with intention and awareness, because those concepts are kind of amorphous. It's hard to nail those down and hold people accountable for those things. And rightly so, because this comes into the area of personal responsibility. So it's a simple thought, to be sure, but it carries a lot of implications. And when you think about it, it carries some indictments with it, if we'll let it. We need to be held accountable, and not just to our bosses or to some outside standard, but to ourselves. I think one of the most powerful things any of us can do to make an impact on the industry, our lives, or those around us is to take personal responsibility for our thoughts and actions, both present, past, and future. And when we take personal responsibility for everything that we do or everything that we say, we tune in a little bit more every step of the way to how we're thinking and what we're saying and the impact of that. And one of the first steps in taking responsibility for the things that we think and the things that we do is to pay attention to and be aware of the things that you're doing at work. The lack of this is the reason why I probably am not as far in my career. as I would like to be. I don't know if any of us are really as far as we'd like to be. There have been many opportunities that we've simply not been aware of because we weren't looking hard enough. And we're going to get into the reasons why here, but an analogy I think would help because I really like analogies. So why not do an analogy? Well, let's take water, for instance, since we all work with water so much. Water is not just going to come to us and tell us about what it has to offer in terms of its energy sources, like its capabilities. If you were just going to stand by a river and look at it, you're not going to really understand its power. You have to harness that power. You have to be able to get in there and understand the element, experiment with it, study it, and intentionally harness that power to let it affect your life. Now think about water as your career, as the world of specialty coffee. You can just stand on the banks and watch it pass by. You can just work in a shop and do the bare minimum, go in, clock out, leave, and then wonder why you're a barista, wonder why you're in coffee. Wait for everything to be given to you. Wait for opportunities to come knocking. You have to go out there and harness the power of what's happening now in your career, or else you're not going to be prepared if opportunity does come to you. Most of what happens that is positive in the life of anyone pursuing a professional path happens because they're making proactive decisions in small ways consistently along the way, and they're practicing for success. So we can't just look at our situation and assume that we know everything about it. We can't just look at it, let it pass, and think that all that's observed is all that is there. There's something deeper at play. How often do we hold back our best efforts because we don't like the job we're in? We want to hold back our best efforts for the perfect job, when in fact our best efforts in the job we hate might be the key to becoming the kind of barista that can handle the job we love in the future. You might just be shooting yourself in the foot right now if you're just playing hard to get with your current work situation. And we quickly think that we have transcended our current place of employment. Like after 2 or 3 years, somehow we've outgrown a coffee bar or a set of customers in a neighborhood. I have a hard time believing that. And I think it comes down to this. Our thoughts about our work, from our shift to the milk run, the closing checklist, dealing with customers, we can either be the type of people who write things off as insignificant or not deserving of our attention or further study, etc. We can just write things off. Doesn't matter. Or we can be the people that write notes. So we write notes because we know that this can be useful. This is something worth studying. It may not be the best thing, and I might not feel great about it, but it is worth learning from. So we're either going to write something off or we're going to write notes about it. Back to the tweet that Cole put out there. If you really want to be intentional and aware of what's going on in your career, and you don't want to sleepwalk through especially your early years as a barista, because those are so formative. But even if you're far into your career, right now might be the absolute best time for you. So there are 7 things that I think we do to really shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to getting the most out of where we are in our careers currently. And these are things that really cause us to sleepwalk through our careers, and thus we miss whole parts of opportunity in our careers where we could be making progress, where we could be finding more fulfillment in our jobs and the relationships and growth that those things bring. So let's just go through them real quick, and I'll dive into them each afterwards. The first is that we assume that we know, and then we don't need to learn any more. The second is we work for the approval of others. We seek the approval of others. 3, we run from pain. 4, we isolate ourselves in pride. 5, we complain. 6, we deflect blame for our thoughts and actions. And 7, we despise our constraints. So let's talk about the first thing. We assume that we know and there's nothing else to know. Like we know something so much that we don't have to really pursue learning anymore. I know my wife pretty well, but I would be a fool to think that I knew the depths of her being. If I knew everything there is to know about her, I never will. And, that's what makes human relationships so exciting, is that you might know a person in part, and you might be the authority in terms of who knows this person the best. But we can't really get too prideful because there are a lot of layers that we might not ever become aware of in our relationships with friends or family or significant others. That's just the nature of reality. And that goes for your work too, especially considering the fact that our work involves so many different types of people. Let's just talk about this for a second. In nature, even the most outwardly ugly thing, a tree stump or, pile of rotting leaves, depending on how you look at beauty, these things inwardly are held together by a beautiful order and this complexity, a matrix of different things that when you look at them under a microscope or you understand what's holding it together, when you understand it in a more deep way, you can appreciate its beauty in spite of its outward appearance. So we stop too often at the first sight and quickly judge a situation that we're in because we want certainty and we want it quickly. We want to define where we are so that we can move on to redefinition. Mystery and exploration is hard because it's a process and it's not a place. It's not a destination necessarily. Place comes through process. And if you're in the situation where you feel like you have enough knowledge of where you are to write something off and just consider it a light and flippant thing to go into work, you're not looking deep enough. You're not looking at the little things that make up the structure that allow you to have your job at that store, to do what you do in coffee. So that would be my first encouragement to you. If you think you know enough about a thing or a person or a job, you're probably not looking hard enough and deep enough to the inner workings of what holds it all together. So number 2 here on the list is we work for the approval of others. This is something that we do to our detriment. And let me explain this. You do need to please your boss. You do need to follow the rules and accomplish the task. Do what you were hired to do. But don't let that define you or be the why behind your work. You can't just rely on the standard that is set by others around you. If you really want to get ahead and progress in your career, you have to have an internal standard that is elevated above the standard where you currently are. You have to have a higher standard for yourself than others set for you. And you can't work for their approval because people will let you down. You might have a bad boss. You still need to do what they want you to do, but you might not ever get their approval. And that is just a terrible place to be in, because then you start to question yourself. You start to question your sanity. Certainly there's bitterness and hurt feelings and emotions that get entangled in this. You can't latch on to the idea that everyone around you needs to be approving of you and loving you. They're not going to always love you. They might not like you. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a standard for yourself that uses this opportunity in work to your advantage. It doesn't mean that you need to stay there necessarily, but don't let the approval of others keep you in a place of emotional torment and stagnation and growth. Because that's what's going to happen if you seek to work so that somebody is giving you a smile or seems friendly towards you, and not for some other intrinsically, personally held reason. So number 3 reason why we sleepwalk through our careers is we tend to run from pain. So when we feel pain, we wince, we retract our hand when we're burned in a fire. We're not wired to be able to just stay in a painful situation. That's healthy. That, a lot of times you need to get away from a painful situation. But the thing is, not all pain is something that you need to run from. When it comes to growing pains, when it comes to things where you're outside your comfort zone, or you're being put in a situation that is really stretching you and the pain comes, we shouldn't really avoid that pain. Like if you are put on the spot to take on a project, or like if you've never done a catering event before and you're supposed to lead the project to do this catering event and you back down from it because it's uncomfortable, then you're running from pain. You're running from the opportunity to grow in that thing. We like to think we can grow and growth can happen and it be painless. Like somehow we're going to be put under, and then when we come out, like surgery, we're going to be better. Well, it doesn't work like that, because if you're put under, you miss the opportunity. You need to be aware. You need to be present in the moment to be able to take advantage of the growing opportunity. If you ever get a chance to hear about the ultra runner named David Goggins, he's talking about these crazy, 100-mile races that last for like 3 days. Did some crazy stuff. He did some race where he just didn't even train for it. And he went to do a qualifying race for one of the hardest races in the world, and he had to run 100 miles on a track on, fractured shin bones, and he was peeing blood, and he still had 20 some odd, or maybe even 30 miles to go, and he did it. This guy used to be a Navy SEAL, and one of the quotes that he's always saying when he's interviewed is, suffering is a part of growth. You can't grow unless there's suffering involved. Is that an overstatement? I don't know. Because oftentimes when we're in the position of our most formative times, they tend to be very uncomfortable. But we can look back and say, man, I learned a lot in those times. And the more present you are and the more clear-headed you are, the more you embrace that idea that this pain is a good kind of pain, then the less likely you are to sort of sabotage yourself by running away from it subconsciously or trying to distance yourself from it. So embrace the pain that comes along with growth. Number 4, we isolate ourselves in pride. What I mean by this is when we feel like we're too good for a place, but we have to work there until the better opportunity comes. Like maybe we're going to go to a competition and some other coffee shop is going to recognize how great we are, and they're going to, totally headhunt us, and we're going to go and get a better job. First of all, you're not all that hot. Let me just tell you. No, none of us are. If you think you're a superstar in the barista world, just repeat that phrase back to yourself. Superstar in the barista world, in coffee, famous in coffee. Fame itself. I mean, what do these things really mean anyway in the grand scheme of things? That's pride talking. What are you doing right now for the shop where you are to bring the team together? If this is you and this is something that you're struggling with, I would challenge you to look and see if maybe you aren't a part of the problem. In the store. It's one of the questions I like to ask people when they are interviewing for a barista job is, In what way did you contribute to the problems or the dysfunction in your last job? And some of the worst answers I get to that question are, I don't know, or I can't think of anything, or even when people start to throw coworkers under the bus and say maybe they didn't correct people enough, and that was how they contributed. So there is a pride issue that causes us to pull ourselves away. We play coy with the team. We distance ourselves like somebody who just put in their 2-week notice, and you can tell that they've started to kind of, they're not going to finish strong. They're just kind of 1 foot out the door. But some of us have been 1 foot out the door for the last 2 years because we don't have any other offers on the table. And I've got news for you. If that is you, then you've been sleepwalking through your career for the last 2 years by not being all in where you are. And guess what would happen? If you were all in where you are, you'd learn so much and you'd become so valuable as an employee. Either you'd start to love your job and you wouldn't want to leave it, or somebody else would recognize you and come to you, and you would be more prepared for that job. So don't isolate yourself in that. Put yourself fully into where you are. Don't think of it like people deserve you or don't deserve you. Listen, we're all growing, and none of us are above learning, and none of us should be playing the game of better than or worse than. Okay, so the fifth thing here, moving on, is complaining. Now, bringing a complaint to a manager is absolutely something you should do when something happens like harassment in the workplace, theft, problems. There are complaints that are done in the spirit of wanting to build up. But then there's this category of complaining that we see. It's like this commiseration that is not seeking to create positive change. It's just seeking to build a case against something without resolution, without solution. And that's the kind of complaining that you want to be wary of, because it's like a pack dog mentality. It's like a mob mentality that it's easy to get caught up in. There's this idea that people can band together more readily against a common enemy. They can unify around a common enemy more so than they will unify themselves around a common value or a common good, like promoting something they all believe in. So we'll say, I don't believe in this, or we all think that this sucks. That's great. But when was the last time you saw a throng of people or a really long thread of like violently typing baristas talking about how grateful they were or how awesome it was at their workplace? And I love that too, man. Yeah, and that's my favorite part of being a barista too. That's amazing. No one really does that because the momentum is not as just on the tip of our tongue or our fingertips in this case. As it is, as our vitriol, as our complaining, as our commiseration, all of those things, I think, are toxic. And it really does a disservice to the real good forms of complaint, because we should save our complaints for things that truly matter, like the things I mentioned before. If you don't want to sleepwalk through your career, don't get thrown off track by complaining. Be a part of the group of people that finds the positive, that employs daily thankfulness for what is going on the bar. It might take a little bit more energy to look for those things because we're conditioned to look for negative things, but it's totally worth it in the end. And I really need to practice this more myself. For sure. And in all of these things, I need to hear these because there are, as I speak, there are so many situations I can think of where I have failed and I have so much room for growth. So on to number 6, and I think this one is really an interesting one. We deflect the blame for our thoughts and actions onto others or onto circumstances, companies, or whatever. You ever hear the phrase come out of your mouth, they made me do, fill in the blank, or, he or she made me so mad. We can choose the reactions that we have. We can choose to become angry or to become joyful. We can choose the way we think and the way we act. Too much of the time, I give people authority. I allow them to control me. I give them permission to create emotions in me. I give them permission to affect me a certain way. And I technically don't have to, but it's just so much easier to pin it on them than it is to rein in my reactions. It's easier to react than it is to create. And I don't know if I've said this on a previous podcast or before or not, but creation and reaction are the same letters. They're just rearranged a little bit, but they are so different. With reaction, the way it works is we really don't think about what we are about to say or do. We just say or do. With creation, what happens is we allow a space between receiving this catalyst, whatever it is. Maybe it's a feedback being given to you. Maybe it's an insult or whatever it is. There's this gap where we can think. And in that time, we then create a scenario where we are in control of what we say or do, more so than if we rely on pure instinct. This is something that can really derail your time in the bar because when you deflect the blame, you're not going to become more mature. You're just going to get more adept at avoiding responsibility. And if you hope to progress and take on more responsibility, maybe even lead other people, you have to be able to lead yourself. And leading yourself often looks like taking on in just humility, feedback, and taking control of the way that you act and the things that you say in concert with what's happening around you. So you don't get taken for a ride by the shift or by people or by you're working with or by customers. You know that saying, run the bar, don't let the bar run you. So how much of our professional life is spent feeling like we just are along for the ride and we're really not in control? This is one of those areas where we can start taking control, taking on the responsibility, holding ourselves accountable for our actions and our thoughts, and not letting other people control how we feel, what we say, and what we think. And finally, number 7, we despise constraints. How do we sleepwalk through our careers? Well, one of the ways is we despise the constraints that are put on us, the limitations. So limitations can be very frustrating, and the grass is greener mentality is something that's very real. It causes us to be jealous of those who have more than we do. And I just want to break this down because constraints oftentimes in history for businesses and individuals, artists, often leads to innovation. It leads to a deeper understanding of the thing being pursued. Somebody who has a physical deformity or somebody who has a physical limitation, somebody who has to paint a different, by holding the brush a different way, will in fact oftentimes invent things in this process that an artist who has full use of their appendages will never think to do because they don't have to. You're not put into a situation where you have to. The kind of resolve that is gained from having to overcome constraints, the creativity, the invention, all of those things, while they're necessary for success and are a bit of a burden in a sense, they end up being somewhat of a richer inheritance for the one with constraints. So let's say you're in a small organization And there are limitations to what is available to you. The limitations in that cafe oftentimes will inspire those who are in those companies to create systems, to create opportunity, and to invent their own way of doing something. And you get to see this from the ground up. And in the end, you get the benefit of that innovation and that creativity and a deeper core understanding of the value of that activity, because there's more risk involved in this sense, because it's not something that you can just do and not worry about the bottom line. You got to have a really, really good why for doing it. Now, if you're a barista and you're part of a larger organization where these things are just part of the organization, first of all, they probably went through their own phase of growing and creating and innovating. But for you, it's going to be harder to find the same kind of value as the one who is in a smaller organization, who has to overcome obstacles, who has to overcome constraints. For you, what you really want to focus on first is making sure that you're not taking for granted these things that are available to you, and know that you're going to have to work hard to dig into and find the core why and value of this thing, because the system has been built up already and you are inheriting a finished thing. And in a sense, the disadvantage is more in the camp of the one who has these things already figured out for them, because they don't get the blessing of being able to figure it out for themselves, or at least see as much of the guts of the creative process as the one who has to go through and overcome obstacles and innovate a path to the same thing. So don't despise your constraints. Oftentimes they actually are the thing that will enrich you and force you to grow into a place that will serve you well in your career to come. To recap the positives from this, the things that you should be practicing, you'll want to really dig deep into where you are right now. Explore it. Look for the hidden meanings and depths of it. And that will help you not assume that you know and stop learning. Work for a standard that is consistent and higher, one that you provide for yourself, that is higher than the one being provided for you. Don't work for others' approval. Work for that higher standard. Work for a better why. You want to also embrace the pain that comes with growth. It's going to be hard. There's going to be uncomfortable times, and it's not going to all seem like it's worth it. But in the end, that pain will subside, and you'll find yourself having become more mature, becoming a better professional, and having grown a ton. Number 4, don't isolate yourself and think that you're too cool for where you are. Don't be prideful, but put yourself in a level of a learner. Go all in. Don't be 1 foot out the door for a year or 2 while you're in a cafe. Give yourself completely to where you are and be a part of the team. Be a part of a solution. And I think you'll see a lot of positive growth from that. Don't complain. Try to find things to be thankful for within your current circumstance on a daily basis. You have to practice that, because our natural inclination, again, is to go on to complaining, go on to this kind of toxic cycle of negativity. Then take authority for your actions and your thoughts and your emotions too. Don't give others the authority to manipulate your emotions or your thoughts or your actions, and don't blame other people for how you act. You are the one choosing to do whatever it is you have done or plan on doing. So take on the responsibility for those things on a daily basis. And then finally, if you do have limitations in your career, look at those as blessings, because historically, a lot of the best thinkers, a lot of the best innovations and creativity work being done is being done by people, or it has been done by people who have been under the greatest constraints, and it's forced them to find innovative solutions, deeper understanding of their field of study, and there's no reason why that can't be you. So look at this as actually something that you have as an advantage. All right, everybody. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode and that some of these points really resonated with you and got you thinking about maybe how you can disrupt some of these patterns in your own business, in your own career as a manager or a barista. And of course, with COVID-19 and the pressure being put on businesses right now, these are really important to lean into and think about how they might be sabotaging our success in the midst of, as the last point points out, the constraints that we are currently under. So again, happy to share this with you all. I'm going to, as always, put in some links to the show notes that give you recommended episodes to follow this up. I highly encourage you, whenever you see recommended links to other shows, that is going to be very helpful. I purposefully put those there because sometimes a 35-minute, 45-minute, or an hour-long episode is just not enough time to really consider an issue. I know that for a podcast, that's those are classic timestamps and everything, but if we're really wanting to pursue a train of thought, those recommended episodes are designed to sort of get a little bit deeper and hit some different angles. So I hope you take some time to follow those as well. But right now, that is the end of our episode, and I'm grateful that you took the time to join me today. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email me. Chris@keystotheshop.com is the email, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.